Okay, with Bethany Teague, Team Ocean is the short film. It's 40 minutes long. It is about 10 nonprofits who are kind of band together or collude together, whatever you want to call it, to make a better future for our ocean, which fascinates me about your documentary, which is great, but we can get into the minutia of it. But it's like, how do 10 nonprofits get together and have one issue? I find that fascinating that everybody's kind of getting along to kind of fight this ocean, if that makes sense. It's like usually these organizations are all kind of have their own agenda and whatnot, but it seems like this is everybody's on the same page here.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting and really encouraging for us. I think our team really came away with that same feeling of just really being uplifted. I think a lot of times the stories that we hear about the ocean today are all kind of doom and gloom, which I think there's certainly a place for that and a reason for that. And there are a lot of problems that we're facing, but I think it's more rare to kind of have those stories of teamwork and of people using their gifts to really make progress in certain areas. So that was really uplifting for our team to see. So it's actually interesting how it works, and a little bit of background on us that would kind of help that make a little bit more sense. So we are our team is from the Click and Pledge Foundation. We're located in Blacksburg, Virginia, and our foundation was founded by our parent company, Click and Pledge, back in 2017. And Click and Pledge is a nonprofit fundraising platform, and we serve nonprofits all around the world. And so the Click and Pledge launched and funded the foundation in 2017 with the mission of using filmmaking to share the stories of these nonprofits, to share their impact, to get more support, to raise awareness. And so we actually identified these 10 nonprofits who are all kind of working in a different aspect of ocean advocacy all around the United States. And so these nonprofits weren't necessarily already teaming up together with one another, but through Click and Pledge, we were able to identify them and kind of weave all 10 of these stories together into one. And so I think, like I said, for our team, it was really encouraging to see all of these people working so hard. And I also think it was really encouraging for those nonprofits as well, once they saw the finished product, to also see all these other organizations that are working so hard in with all kind of a really similar mission. So I think it was uplifting for everybody.
You kind of brought people together then with the documentary.
Yeah, which was, I think, a really good honor, and it was fun for us to see, because I think a lot of times people who are working in the nonprofit space, it can be a tough gig, there it can be a really discouraging thing at times. And so it was fun for us to see some of these organizations just so uplifted and responding to seeing other organizations that are doing similar work.
Okay, so let's talk about, okay, so you started in television news reporting, and then you kind of did
Mhm.
segments, and then you left to do documentary films like why reason why we're talking now. And then you did a short film that did very well. And then now this is like what would you call it? Like I call it the epic short film. Like it's
Yeah.
40 minutes. It's like
It's
it's
a
in that
weird
gray area.
length. Yeah.
And so basically so then you're kind of moving up the ranks in a sense where like you understand how to you understand filmmaking, you understand how to put a news story together. So tell me about this particular project and how it started. What was the origin story of how this kind of project came together?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because so we're located in the Appalachian Mountains, so the nearest beach is 5 or 6 hours away.
Mhm.
But we actually have a handful of scuba divers here on our team, and so we were kind of talking. I guess it would have been late 2022 about how I wonder how we can combine these passions together for nonprofits, for filmmaking, and for with scuba diving. And so that was kind of the first conversation that Project Ocean and then the film Team Ocean was born out of. So Project Ocean was the overarching initiative. So we actually made a handful of videos for each organization for them to be able to use, and then Team Ocean was the film that brought all of those narratives together. We did some service projects. We actually got to participate as divers in a coral restoration project down in Bonaire in the Caribbean. So Project Ocean encompassed a lot. So that was kind of the initial conversation of I wonder how this is a unique thing that we're a team of of filmmakers and also scuba divers, and then the nonprofit aspect as well. So that was kind of how it started, and we didn't know exactly what it was going to look like back then, but it morphed into what it is now.
Oh, wow. So like, did you always like in terms of like mapping out the story, what was your kind of game plan? Did you kind of write a script? Did you know who you're going to interview? Like, what was the kind of process of like figuring out what the story is? Obviously, you have underwater footage, which is the highlight of the film. Did you, when you're setting out to make these documentaries, like I'm assuming you had a script, and meaning that like there was a distinct game plan in place before you started filming.
Yes and no, I'd say. I think some of that kind of comes from my news background a little bit, is that I approach a lot of these stories almost still as a journalist, in the
Mhm.
sense of I just kind of want to show up and see what the story is for myself, rather than necessarily having a really detailed plan. But we did go in with the framework of, okay, we've got these 10 organizations. We want to somehow weave one narrative, one cohesive story together about what they're doing, instead of just telling each really separate
Yeah.
individual story. And I think one thing, as we started going out and filming with these organizations, that we kept hearing from them is kind of what I was saying earlier, is that there actually is a lot of good news. There is a lot of good things to talk about, progress that we're making, and those stories don't often get told. And that from the standpoint of trying to raise support, if people basically think the whole thing is hopeless, then they're not going to really participate in doing their part or contributing where they can. So it's important to convey that there is something we can do. This isn't a completely lost cause, to advocate for the ocean. So that was something that was really important to the nonprofits to share. So as we started filming with them, that was kind of something that really built into the way we wanted to tell the story, was to really present the problems, but present the different solutions that are possible.
Yeah, yeah, in a sense, you're leaving it on a positive note, right? Like there's optimism that there's there's so many things to tackle with your particular film. So it must have been hard to like kind of like pinpoint exactly what you wanted to say.
That was definitely the most challenging and overwhelming at times part, for us putting the story together. Was like, man, we have so much footage and so many almost endless directions that this story could get
Mm.
taken in. So how do we have so many players and so many different aspects of the ocean advocacy that they're involved in? How do we weave that together into something that holds somebody's attention for 40 minutes?
Was it always going to be 40 minutes? Was that the game? Like that was the plan to have that running?
No, so like I said, I feel like 40 minutes is kind of a weird length. And so I was hoping initially that it would be about an hour, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
But in putting it together, I felt strongly that, you tell the story that needs to be told, and you don't try to make it shorter or longer than it needs to be, right? You just tell it in the best way that it can be told, and whatever it ends up being, it ends up being. So that's it. It was a little bit shorter in the end, but I think there was no need to drag it out further than it needed to be.
So you interviewed like I said, all kinds of people, the fishermen, but what people are going to watch your film. Obviously, you got some amazing underwater footage, especially with the turtles. How did you accomplish that? Were you underwater yourself? Were you filming yourself? I'm just curious how that footage was shot.
Yeah, we had a team, and so a few of us did a little bit of filming underwater. A lot of it was in Bonaire when we were there for the coral restoration project that we were participating in. So this was actually I mean, we've most of us on the team have been diving for a number of years, but this was the first time that any of us attempted collecting footage. So I think we learned a lot, and it was a lot of fun. Um, for me personally, I'm the least experienced diver on the team. So anytime I had grabbed the camera, I would start sinking. So I left most of the filming to the other folks on the team. But it was a lot of fun, and I think we learned a lot.
What was the biggest thing you learned from filming underwater?
Buoyancy control,
Was
and
sorry, what
also
was that?
buoyancy control, how to adjust so that I'm not sinking and shooting up every time I move the camera. But also, just dealing with light and the way that color works, and it's just a whole different game under there than it is normally. So it's almost like you feel like you go back to square one in terms of learning all the basics of
Yeah.
underwater filming.
So you went from both coasts, right? You were in Maine, you went to California. Was that important for you to go from the Pacific to the Atlantic or Atlantic to the Pacific?
Yeah, I think, we really wanted to cover as many aspects as we could in terms of geographically around the US, and just kind of trying to hit all the different unique needs of the different parts of the coast. So and that was actually my first time in Maine. And it definitely lived up to the hype in terms of the beauty of it all. So that I think that was really cool because we went to Washington State, California, Maine, and Maryland. So each part of the country was kind of tackling a unique issue. And I think that really added a lot for us to be able to capture that.
You talked about the fishing industry, where like I know this is never going to happen, but or at least in our lifetime. But the I guess for me, it's like why don't we just stop fishing, and then the ocean would be better, right? But I guess there's economics involved in that. So, but you really get into the minutia of like how the fishing industry works and like how it's not going to go anywhere, but it's definitely changed, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I think it's always, and we try to capture that it's always important to try to balance, to have everything in balance, and to be listening to the perspectives of all players involved. And I think one thing that we also really tried to capture is it's really impossible to separate the human aspect and the cultural and the economic aspect from the conservation aspect. The fishing industry is so ingrained and intertwined with a lot of these human cultures, and so it's not something that we can just necessarily, that has to always be kept in mind when we're talking about trying to regulate and conserve and protect the wildlife as well. So I think it's that, especially when we were in Maine and talking to those folks, they were really advocating for everybody being at the table, and solutions being born out of really open communication between, the people that are actually on the water making a living this way, and the regulators as well. So I think that was an important aspect to capture, was just the teamwork, not just between nonprofits, but teamwork between people who are creating the rules, and people who are kind of on the ground in that sense.
Yeah, well, it's also a huge economy, right? Like it's a
Hmm.
huge industry that there would be some recession or there would be some economic turmoil if this all of a sudden this stopped, the seafood and the fishing industry just stopped, right? So I know it's not what people environmentalists want to hear, but at the same time, it's like you kind of that's sort of what you're saying in the film, right? Like it's how can we stop this?
Yeah, and it kind of made me think of, so I started my news reporting career in West Virginia, and I think it kind of reminded me a little bit of what I saw in in that part of the country when coal is kind
Yeah,
of going away, but it's not always been done in a way that really takes care of the people who made their living off of that. And so there's just so much devastation when you just kind of come in and dismantle an industry, but there's not really a different path for a lot of those people. And so I really hope that we can learn something from that, and that would never be the way that it would get handled in the fishing industry as well.
Is that your next film?
What's that?
The cold, like the
Cool.
Appalachian
Cool.
Mountains, the cold and the,
Um, I've always, I mean, there's a lot of stories to
yeah.
tell on that end. So I've not lived in West Virginia for a handful, probably, I guess, 10 years now. But it's always got a piece of my heart, there's always, I would love to go back at some point and tell some more stories from there.
Well, it seems like you're in a good spot because you know the world, but then now you have perspective. Now you have like now you're not too close to it, right? So, and obviously this is something I've talked about this. It's on other podcasts. Like the Appalachian Mountains is something that hasn't people don't really. It's funny that like in a general sense, it's like it's not really known as much as it should
Mhm.
be. It's beautiful and it's like amazing, and there's all these kind of crazy things that are happening, but it's like it doesn't get documented as much as like maybe it's like a coastal bias. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, I grew up in New Bern, North Carolina, so on the coast of North Carolina, but I mean, it's really only about 5 hours from the Appalachian Mountains. But I mean, I didn't really know anything about the culture until I moved there for college, actually. So I think it's just so rich in stories to tell, and the people are so wonderful. And I think unfortunately there are a lot of negative stereotypes, and in some aspect there is a reason for that as well. I mean, there is a lot of poverty and a lot of challenges to face in that region, but there's also, again, just like we were talking about with the ocean, there's so many good things happening, and there's so much beauty in the people and the culture that are there. And so I think it's such a rich place for heritage and for storytelling.
Well, you're in this particular film, you're very good at like pinpointing good interviews. Like these people are very everybody comes across like kind of very like grounded and kind of like they're not overly emotional. They're just kind of telling you what their version is. Like you obviously you must have a talent as a well, just because who you are, but also because your experience in news reporting. How did you find the interviews? Because it's like it's not too much. You kind of like pinpoint one person, maybe two per segment, like per kind of section of your film, kind of to tell the story, right? So you kind of don't like it's kind of a way, really great way to tell to make your film. So curious about finding these people for the interviews.
Yeah, I was so impressed with them as well. And a lot of our films that we've done in the past have really been maybe more emotionally focused, or about really heavy topics. And so I think in this film, it was really fun for me to kind of change that up a little bit, in the sense that a lot of the interviews were really just talking to people about their passion and their expertise.
Mhm.
And so just kind of getting them in that space, I think about Upwell Turtles, just kind of getting him going about turtles was so much fun, because I mean, that guy could have talked endlessly. I mean,
Yeah.
his breadth of knowledge. He spent his entire career studying this, and so it was just a lot of fun to create an opportunity for these people to just really share what they know and what they've learned. And so that, I mean, it really, I just kind of sat back, honestly, and let them go for the most part.
So so you went to Maine, you went to California, you were in Washington, correct?
Hmm. In Maryland as well.
In Maryland. So who's your team? Did you just go like I'm assuming you went with you had at least one other person was as a crew member for your film?
Yes. So Rod Rosvan is our director of photography. So he and I mostly did the filming, and then we had a couple other folks helping us out when we were doing underwater footage as well. So Rod and I were kind of the ones, at least on land, traveling around.
Gotcha. And then so in basically how many days did you shoot? How many days was the shoot?
Let's see. So our West Coast trip was 12 days, I think, and Maine was a few days, and Maryland was a few days. So a little over 2 weeks, I'd say, altogether.
And then when you got back, you basically probably had hours of footage, and you're like, okay, what's
So
the
many
story?
hours.
You probably ask yourself, okay, what's what story am I telling? How does that
Yeah,
process work?
we had to move up from a 2 terabyte hard drive to an 8 terabyte hard drive. So
Okay.
we had quite a bit to go through. But yeah, I think in a way, I mean that was certainly overwhelming at times, but I think in a way, it kind of helped having these 10 different organizations, because it kind of did help just mentally break up the story and have it create a little bit of a natural flow, because there were
Yeah.
these different aspects, and so it was just kind of more of a matter of figuring out which sequentially which aspects make sense to kind of flow into one another.
Yeah. Because it's about the humans basically their relationship with the ocean, right? Meaning that like fishery, then you got the even with sport, like with the surfing and like fun, and it's we're still gonna be a part of the ocean, right? Like the ocean, like it's like that's sort of what you're saying, but we have to like love it. We can't just like take advantage of it, right? And I think I come from a generation where like we never even thought about the environments, to be honest with you. And obviously that's changed. So it's like even the kids now in school education, that's what they're learning about, right? So things are getting reintegrated. But I think that's what it's about. It's about like we can still fish, we can still surf, we can still like have fun with the ocean. We can, but it's still we're almost visitors in a sense. Does that make sense to you? Like we still have to be we still have to love it as a visitor. We can't. It's not ours. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's no separating humans and the ocean, right? We're completely intertwined with one another and impact one another daily, whether we realize it or not. And I think one thing we really tried to bring out is this idea of stewardship rather than just consumerism, right? And I think we can all acknowledge that the ocean has a draw, right? I mean, there's a reason why everybody wants to build their house right on the water. There's a reason why this real estate is the highest demand anywhere. Um, and I certainly understand that. I grew up less than an hour from the beach, and it's deep within me, and very much a part of who I am. There's no place in the world I'd rather be. So I can certainly appreciate that feeling, but I think it's always important, like you said, to remember that we are visitors there, and it is ours to protect and nurture rather than just take from.
Yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, it's a great film. What did you think about? We sent the audience to you. What did you think what the audience had to say about your film?
Yeah, we really appreciated everything that they had to say, and their insights there, and I think it's special for us, especially because our films are sharing the stories of nonprofits. I think it just really feels like an honor to see their missions resonating with other people, and I think that was really encouraging, and felt like there's a deeper mission and point that our film can accomplish to present the work of these nonprofits to people.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, like it's a really terrific film, and we're honored to show it. And I'm curious, what did you if you showed it to the people who were interviewed in the film, like have they watched the film yet?
They did, yep. They all got a chance to see it before we submitted it
That's
anywhere.
good.
So that was also, fun. And like I was saying earlier, I think a lot of their responses were just they were all very encouraged to see how they were presented, but also how all these other organizations are presented in the work that they're doing. So that was a lot of fun for us.
So yeah, because they like it's a really well put together film. So what's next for you? What are you working on now?
So we're still kind of in the works. We're hopefully in the next month or two we'll be announcing what's next. But I do think that we've been having some conversations internally, just because Project Ocean was designed to be a 1 year initiative. But I think that through this project we really we just see how much there is to do and how many stories there are to tell. And so I think regardless of what our next major film will be, I think we really want to continue Project Ocean forward in some aspect of what we do as a company and as a foundation.
Gotcha. Well, congratulations on the film. You're fantastic. And so I'm assuming that you want to make a feature film. The next one it will be a feature film.
That would be a lot of fun, a lot of work, a lot of
Yeah.
fun. So we'll see what happens. I'm
So
counting the 40 minutes as in some festivals it's the feature category, so
yeah,
we'll
like I
count
said,
that.
it's the gray area film,
It's the
right?
great.
So
That's right.
I have 50 minutes. For me, it's like 50 minutes is in the brain, right? So,
Yeah,
but but it's almost like classic television, right? Like 40 minutes, right? Like
that's
an
true.
hour
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
commercials,
There you
right?
go.
But that doesn't exist in well, it still does,
Yeah.
but it really doesn't. So, but I just want to say that like you don't have to say anything, but basically you probably had a really good job like working in as a news reporter, and you kind of like jumping into this, which I'm assuming is your true passion. That's pretty amazing that you did this, right? Because I'm assuming economically it wasn't like a like if you had a financial manager, they would say, "What are you doing?" Right? So basically, like, but you're doing what you love to do, I guess, right?
I'm definitely doing what I love to
Yeah.
do. Do think it's it's a funny. So journalism is not where the money is.
Okay.
I
Okay.
will
Sorry. Well,
say
I
that.
thought that like news reporting, I thought that like on TV is like maybe it's my ignorance.
No, I think it's a bit unfortunate because I mean it's such an important thing. Journalism is so
Yeah.
important, but I mean it honestly is a hard thing for people to stay in long term. But my reasons for leaving, I think, had more to do with the creative side, because news is very it's so fast paced, right? You have a deadline every single day, so it's extremely rare that you get to work on a story for more than just a few hours, quite literally.
Yeah.
And so I think I found that part really frustrating because I would encounter so many people and so many stories that I was like, "Ah, I just wish I could take a few days or a few weeks on this." So that was the main catalyst for me leaving was being able to now have an opportunity that I can take pretty much as long as I feel is necessary to really tell these stories and tell them to take them as far as I can. So creatively, it's been a really rewarding change.
That's amazing. Well, hopefully we can talk again when you make your next film, because I'm assuming there will be many more films, and we appreciate you submitting to us. And yeah, we just wish you all the ultimate best with this film and with your future projects. Because yeah, obviously you're a great storyteller. This is a really great film, and it doesn't feel like we're kind of like obsessing on the burning time, but it doesn't feel like 40 minutes. It just feels like a quick movie. It just goes so fast, and I watched it the second time and I was breaking it down, and I'm like, oh my god, there's so many elements in your story. Like you go to all the coasts, you go to all like you're like you just miss Florida, I guess, right? But
Yeah,
basically, like
that would have been nice.
yeah,
But
that's another idea for your next
yeah,
film.
maybe next
Basically,
time. Yeah,
the alligators and yeah, and the swamps, right? So yeah,
there you go.
yeah, you have so many things to tackle anyway. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah, great film. Like just from a first like fan perspective, and then when I break it down, it's like, yeah, there's some great storytelling here. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for everything that you guys do. As far as festivals, I feel like you guys go above and beyond to really promote the films and give filmmakers an opportunity to share the heart behind what we're doing. So we really appreciate everything that you guys do as well.
I appreciate you for saying that. Thank you so much.